Welcome back to Stock Talk, everyone.
Good to be here.
All right, let's jump right in. Today we're unpacking the Q1 2025 portfolio of Li Lu's Himalaya Capital Management. We've got the latest SEC filing right here.
And it's always fascinating to see what Li Lu is up to. We're talking a $2.21 billion portfolio.
But get this, held in just 8 positions. 8. That's some serious concentration.
It really is.
Yeah.
High conviction investing personified. So this should give us some real insight into his current thinking,
Right.
Especially as a value investor.
Exactly. And hey, if you find this sort of deep dive valuable, do us a solid subscribe, like the video, share it around, maybe drop a comment with your own thoughts. We'd love to hear from you.
Definitely. Okay, so where do we start? 8 holdings.
Let's start at the top. Bank of America, BAC, still the biggest fish.
Yep, still number one. It's 26.12% of the portfolio.
Yeah.
Comes out to about $577.8 million.
Okay, so still a massive position. But the filing shows a pretty significant cut, right?
It does. That's the main story here, down
Yeah.
23.42%. That's 4.2 million shares sold off.
Wow, nearly a quarter of the position. What do you make of that? Just taking some profits after a good run for banks?
That's certainly one possibility, maybe the most obvious one. The market's been strong. Buffet had a decent run. Taking some chips off the table makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But, it could also be a bit more nuanced, maybe adjusting the overall exposure to the banking sector slightly. He still clearly believes it's the largest holding by far.
Right, keeping the core conviction, but maybe trimming around the edges because of valuation or macro outlook.
Exactly. Still likes the long-term fundamentals, retail, wealth management, investment banking, but just dialing back the weight a little. The fact it remains number one says a lot.
Okay, interesting. So moving down the list, Berkshire Hathaway Class B, BRKB, that's climbed up the ranks.
It has. It's now the second largest holding. 21.61% of the portfolio, which is around $478.1 million.
And crucially, the number of shares held didn't change at all.
Correct. Zero change in the share count.
So that tells you its increased weighting is purely down to Berkshire's stock price doing well?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Price appreciation combined with the fact that other things like BOFA were trimmed.
Right.
It just reinforces his long-term confidence in Buffett, Munger's legacy, and the whole diversified Berkshire model.
Okay.
That's down there. Makes sense. Okay, let's talk Alphabet Google. GOGL and GOG. He holds both, but treated them differently this quarter.
Right, this is interesting. He kept his Class A shares, the GOGL ticker, completely untouched. That's still 17.78% of the portfolio, $393.3 million worth.
Okay, but the Class C shares, GOG.
Those he trimmed. Pretty significantly, too, down 19.47%, almost 593,000 shares sold. It's now 17.31% of the portfolio, valued at $383 million.
So trimming the non-voting shares while holding onto the voting ones. What's the potential strategy there? Preference for governance.
That seems like a very plausible read. Keep the voting power with the Class A, maybe take some profits on the Class C shares, which perform similarly.
But look, he still holds a massive amount of both. Over 35% of the portfolio combined is in Alphabet. So the conviction in Google's overall business, search, cloud, maybe AI potential, that's clearly still very strong.
Yeah, that's a huge bet still. Okay, next up, East West Bancorp, EWBC.
Unchanged. Holding steady at 11.26% of the portfolio. That's $249.2 million.
This one feels like a very specific long-term Li Lu thesis, doesn't it? The U.S.-Asia banking connection.
Absolutely. He's known for his focus on Asia, particularly China. EWGC is right in that sweet spot of cross-Pacific banking, trade finance, wealth management for that demographic. Holding it steady suggests that long-term thesis remains intact.
Gotcha. Then we have a couple of energy plays. Occidental Petroleum, OXY.
Also unchanged. Relatively smaller position, 3.27%, about $72.4 million.
And Sable Offshore Corp, SOC.
Same story, unchanged share count, even smaller, 1.54%, about $34.1 million, though its relative weight might have ticked up slightly just because other things were sold.
So holding steady on energy, OXY for broader exposure, maybe inflation protection, and Sable for a more niche offshore angle.
Seems like it. Diversification within the energy sector. Suggests he's comfortable with their long-term prospects despite the usual energy price swings. No major changes there.
Right. Which brings us to the elephant in the room this quarter, Apple, AAPL.
Yeah, this is the dramatic one, a massive cut.
How big are we talking?
He sold off 65.19% of his Apple shares. Over 207,000 shares gone.
Wow. So it went from a decent position
To the smallest holding in the portfolio, now just 1.11%, valued at only $24.6 million.
Okay, that's way more than just trimming. What could be behind such a drastic reduction? Did he lose faith?
It certainly raises questions. More than just profit-taking, you'd think. Could be serious concerns about Apple's future growth prospects, market saturation, innovation
Or
cycles.
maybe just valuation. Apple's had a great run. Maybe he felt it got ahead of itself.
Valuation is almost certainly a factor for a value investor like Lilu. Perhaps he sees better risk-reward elsewhere and needed the capital, but cutting that much, it definitely signals a significant shift in his view on Apple, at least at its current price and prospects.
A really notable move. Okay, let's zoom out. We've gone through the holdings. What's the big picture strategy these Q1 moves suggest?
Well, I think the main takeaway is a sort of cautious stance, maybe, strategic reductions in some big winners, but holding on to core convictions.
So the big cuts in BOFA, Alphabet Class C, and especially Apple, you see those as potentially profit-taking valuation discipline rather than a total loss of faith.
Largely, yes. Especially since BOFA remains number one and Alphabet is still huge overall. Apple is the one that looks more like a fundamental reassessment, perhaps.
And the concentration in financials is still really strong, even with the BOFA trim. You've got BOFA, Berkshire, East West Bancorp.
Exactly. Financials remain a clear area of focus. Technology is more selective now, big on Alphabet's diverse platform, and maybe AI, but much less so on Apple's consumer hardware focus.
And the faith in Berkshire seems unwavering.
Absolutely. That's the bedrock, it seems. And then you have that diversification within financials, like we discussed with EWBC, and within energy with OXY and SOC.
So it's not just concentration, but diversification within the concentrated themes.
That's a good way to put it. It looks like a tactical recalibration. He's sticking to his philosophy, quality businesses, strong competitive positions, but making adjustments based on price and outlook.
And keeping it to just 8 names really underlines that high conviction approach. No messing around with tiny positions.
None at all. If it's in the portfolio, he likely has deep conviction in it, even if he trims it a bit.
Okay, so to wrap up our analysis, Lilu's Q1 moves show him banking some nice profits, trimming positions perhaps on valuation grounds, making a significant cut to Apple, but largely sticking with his highly concentrated, long-term, value-oriented strategy focused on financials and select tech.
That sums it up well. A fascinating glimpse into how a top investor navigates the current market.
Definitely. So final thought for you listening, what can you take away from Lilu's approach here? Maybe it's about how you balance taking profits with holding on to your long-term winners.
Or perhaps how his different handling of Alphabet's share classes makes you think about companies with dual-class structures in your own portfolio.
Good questions. Definitely some food for thought and worth digging into further based on your own research. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive today.
Thanks, everyone.